Welcome to another broadcast of Crime Beat with Ron Chepesiuk, the show that puts you, the listener, into the back alleys and boardrooms of the world's most fascinating subject, crime. Crime Beat brings you a lineup of dynamic and provocative guests who allow you to experience their lives and learn more about crime. Al Prophet, the noted crime documentarian, says, quote, Crime Beat is the best show of its kind for the thinking listener, both entertaining and educational. Let me introduce the host of Crime Beat, Ron Chepesiuk. He is a native of Thunder Bay, Canada, and an award-winning author, documentary producer, director, publisher, and screenwriter. Ron is a two-time Fulbright Scholar to Bangladesh and Indonesia, and is a consultant to the History Channel's Gangland TV series. Ron is also a former instructor in the UCLA's Extension Journalism program. 3 of Ron's books have been optioned for movies, and the Discovery Channel has licensed Ron's documentary, The Frank Matthews Story. It's Ron's books, Ron's travels, and Ron's interviews that make him a leading expert on the fascinating world of crime. Now here he is, the guy with the big picture and his finger on the pulse of crime, Mr. Ron Chepesiuk.
Thank you, Scott, for that nice introduction. Good evening, world, wherever you are tonight. Well, it's another show and another wild day in America. You know, Scott, I've been trying to watch a movie last couple of days, but the news is more exciting than the movie. Just breaking news, you know. Have you been keeping up with all these? I know you work 24 hours a day on this station here, so you probably don't follow it, but have you been following some of these events?
Yeah, I'm a news junkie. You still watch those old National Geographic films?
Yeah, I still watch them, you know, on that. And the news just gets more, it's more preposterous, you know. Trump was going to give Putin a $50 million condo.
Trump's in trouble.
It's amazing. I mean, this stuff is just amazing, and it's not going to end well. I don't think for America on that. But we'll focus on our show tonight, and we have another great one. We have journalist A.J. Flick, and we are discussing her book, Toxic Rage: A Tale of Murder in Tucson. And of course, that's Tucson, Arizona. The book tells the story of Dr. Brian Stidham, a young and talented surgeon who moved to Tucson for a better life. He would work with an established eye surgeon and take over his practice. 3 years later, he was dead. What happened to Dr. Brian Stidham? Tonight, we'll find out, and it's a really intriguing story. We will be with A.J. Flick shortly to discuss it, but first, they take care of some business. Our acknowledgments to the people who are helping to make Crime Beat one of the most popular shows on the Internet. First, I'd like to thank all the listeners out there from around the world for listening to Crime Beat. We're thrilled and delighted to announce we've had overwhelming positive comments and thumbs up on our program. Some of our shows are averaging between 160 and 200,000 listeners every week from more than 160 countries around the globe. All shows are free and downloadable. You miss a live show, go to the artistfirst.com website to listen to it. You can take our shows and post them on the web on any website if you want. I'd like to thank our sponsor, CG Media Books, for supporting our show. Thanks also to production people at Artist First Radio Network, and particularly Scott and Tony for making the show possible. And a special thanks to the Rock and Ryan brothers for allowing us to use their great music for our theme song. It's got the beat to crime written all over it. Now let's look at the mailbag this week. We continue to get mail from all over the world. Some comments are long, so we edit them for length. This one is from Michael of Abilene, Texas. Mike writes, I've tuned in to several of your shows. I was startled to hear you say Roger Stone, President Trump's ally, would be on your show. Does Stone really think LBJ was behind the assassination of John F. Kennedy? Talk about an out-of-touch conspiracist. Michael doesn't say if you listen to the show, Scott, but it was a wild show, wasn't it? Trying to lay the blame on LBJ is kind of a little bit out of the mainstream, right?
Well, I think there's a lot of credence to that argument.
Yeah. There's a lot. Well, yeah. I mean, you know, it's one of the few conspiracy theories that I think that has some credibility to it. You know, it's hard to believe that Oswald did it, but LBJ, come on, give me a break on that. But you can all listen to his to this interview and see the argument put forth by Roger Stone on that. We encourage you to continue emailing us with your comments and suggestions. You can do that at crimebeat123@yahoo.com. That's crimebeat123@yahoo.com. Tell us if you don't want to use your name, no problem. So what have you been up to? Just go to the CGMediaBooks.com website. Several books out or coming out. Personally, I'm working on a couple of screenplays. I've got a couple of things that are going to be happening in 2019, and we look forward to a big year personally on that. We'll keep you informed as we move forward. Crime Beat offers great affordable advertising opportunities for sponsors and authors. We have several packages to meet your budget. Contact us at crimebeat123@yahoo.com. Let's take a look at next week's show. The hits just keep coming. On December 6, 2018, we will have Bruce Sackman, Michael Vescioni, and Jerry Smitterer, and they're the authors of Behind the Murder Curtain. Special Agent Bruce Sackman hunts doctors and nurses who kill our veterans. Wow, this happened in the VA system. It's going to be really interesting and a different show on that. We look forward to that. Now let's look at the news for this week. We call this a rap sheet part of our program. Our rap sheet features a couple items of news that have caught our attention and you might have missed. Well, folks, if you guessed that Netflix and Warner Brothers would rather not entangle themselves in a $150 million lawsuit from the Satanic Temple over a statue, you guessed correctly. The companies have settled with the Satanic Temple over claims the goat-headed statue in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina violated the copyright and trademark rights for the temple's own Bahamut statue. While most of the terms of the deal aren't public, the temple said Netflix and Warner Brothers have recognized the unique elements of the statue in the credits for already filmed Sabrina episodes. He's not clear if this will affect the statue's presence in the future episodes. In a statement, the temple said it had, quote, amicably reached a truce, but also said that it received, quote, hate mail from people concerned it might wreck the show. Wow. The Satanic Temple argued that people have misplaced priorities and were focused more on their entertainment than weightier issues like religious liberty. Well, I guess worshiping Satan is a form of religion, right, Scott?
Okay.
You're not going to go there, right, tonight on that?
No.
Well, it's interesting. We'll keep you informed of this story, of any more developments. I haven't seen the Sabrina show. Have you, Scott?
No, I have not.
Yeah, on that. It's not my type of show anyways, but you may want to check it out there, folks, to see what happened with this story. This other one is really interesting, too. A lot of you might have followed or are following cartoonist Charlie Brown. I used to when I was a lot younger. Well, Charlie Brown has joined Friends and The Simpsons as TV shows to be hit by a racial controversy after a Thanksgiving special dating back to 1973 was aired again. I didn't see that. The episode features the cartoon's only black character, Franklin, I remember him, sitting in a lawn chair on one side of a festive dinner table. The 5 white characters and Snoopy the dog sit on different sides in what appears to be dining seats. And one Twitter user said, quote, why is Franklin in a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving sitting all by himself at the table? Man, things that I did not notice as a child. The outrage came after the special, which is shown every year in the U.S., was aired by ABC Special. So this was shown every year in the U.S., and this year it's got attention. Another critic tweeted, not watching Charlie Brown Thanksgiving anymore until they sit some people on the same side of the table as Franklin. The scene in question centers on an impromptu holiday feast of jelly beans and ice cream in Charlie Brown's backyard. At one point, the lonely Franklin, who's clearly too polite to question the unorthodox seating arrangement, topples over in his half-broken chair. For some reason, no one appears to mention that there's a perfectly good dining seat free. One commentator said, they give our friend the busted chair and we won't even sit on the same side of the table. More proof that Charlie Brown and his cohorts are racist. But others defended the classic cartoon and pointed out its creator, the late Charles Schulz, may rest in peace, fought to add Franklin to the cast to stand up to the racism in 1968. The character was created after a teacher wrote to Schulz and asked for a black child to be included. Harriet Glickman told Schulz that something as small as him writing a child of color into his work as the friend of a white child could make a real difference in race relations in the U.S. What was not noticed in 1960 is now considered racist in 2018, Scott.
They're destroying my childhood, Ron.
Really. I mean, nothing's sacred anymore. Anyways, I'm going to try to catch the show next year, see what they do with it. That might be interesting. Or if they run it, they might even run it. In any case, that's it for the rap sheet for this week. We will be with our special guest, AJ Flick, after we take a station identification break. Scott?
You are listening to Crime Beat on the Artist First Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can pick them up at artistfirst.com. Now back to your host, Mr. Ron Chepesiuk.
Well, listeners, Crime Beat featured guest this evening is AJ Flick, and we'll be discussing her book, Toxic Rage, A Tale of Murder in Tucson. The book tells the story of Dr. Brian Stidham, a young and talented surgeon who moved to Tucson, Arizona for a better life. He would work with an established eye surgeon and take over his practice. 3 years later, he was dead. So what happened to Dr. Brian Stidham? A.J. Fleck is a writer and editor, and she's based in Tucson, Arizona. Her byline has appeared in numerous news websites and publications across the country. Welcome to the show, A.J. Fleck.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Well, congratulations on the book. It's a heck of a story. It's a really amazing story.
Yes.
On that.
Yes. Thank you.
What kind of reception have you gotten to the book?
Oh my gosh, it's been so great. I love that a lot of people, and some of them I don't even know, they keep telling me that it is easy to read and hard to put down, and I consider that very high praise.
Well, that is the perfect praise.
Yes.
All the writers I know. It's quite an unusual story. You have one physician murdering another, right? And that's,
yes.
And that's quite, you think of physicians being, gentle creatures, but this is a really brutal story, the way it played out.
Yeah, forget about first do no harm.
Yeah, right, do no harm, right, the famous physician expression. But, I mean, that has something to do with the attraction of the story, right? People are fascinated by it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you have a very unlikely murder victim. It's not every day that, a popular physician is killed and that they accuse another physician of hiring a hitman, and the hitman is the most unlikely hitman as well. It's not like, he called up, 1-800-HITMAN and found somebody, the person that they accused of actually doing the killing also was not somebody that you would think of as being a hitman.
Well, he called her, right? Where's my money? We'll talk about that later on that. But there's a lot of media. So, my question is, did the, we'll talk about who the perpetrator was later, but Dr. Schwartz, but did he get a fair trial?
Well, so far it's held up. They're still appealing the case, but there were, I think, a lot of people, especially a lot of people in Tucson and in the western U.S., because it was a pretty publicized trial. And I always wanted to tell the story behind the things that were never introduced in court. And so a lot of people are surprised at these elements that were never introduced and given to the jury, so including who the first suspect was. And so it's not for me to say it was a fair trial. That's not my job, but so far it seems like things have held up.
Right on that. Well, you covered the case for this Tucson citizen, which you told me yesterday does not exist anymore.
That's right.
Right on that.
Yes.
You were there every day, right?
Yes. I was actually at the time of the killing. I was covering courts for the Tucson citizen, and I was actually literally up the street about a mile away when Dr. Stidham was being killed.
Oh, wow.
And I promise you I had nothing to do with it. I have alibis, I have witnesses.
That's
and and it was not when it happened the next day. I mean, it was the talk of the town.
Right.
Everybody was shocked, and I, like everybody else, even though I knew eventually if they would catch someone, then it would become my case to follow.
Right.
But at first it was the cop beat reporters, and we would just keep watching. There was a lot of pressure on the sheriff's department to arrest somebody, so everybody was very eager to find out if someone would be arrested and who that would be.
Right. Well, you told me that the Tucson citizen no longer exists.
Yes.
And when did it go out of business?
Next year it'll be 10 years.
Oh, wow. And is it a casualty of everything going digital?
Oh, perhaps it's the industry, everything wrong with the industry, and Gannett simply wanted to cut its losses, and in an unusual twist, it's kind of hard to explain, but even closing the paper, Gannett still makes money, so
right.
They decided to do that.
Right, but it led to you getting out of everyday journalism, right?
Yes.
You're in advertising now?
Yes, well, right now I'm a writer with an ad agency, but I also freelance. I still freelance occasionally, covering court stories for Bloomberg News Service, and then I do my own writing, and of course, finally getting this book published was the big kahuna.
Right, exactly. Well, it's your first book, right?
Yes.
I'm always sympathetic because I worked as a professor at a university for a long time, and I was writing always on the side on that. And I know how tough it is. Is that what you had to do? You had to rush home and spend your evenings and Saturdays and Sundays doing the book?
Well, the book was actually, a lot of it was written closer to the trials. There was another publisher who actually came to me and wanted me to write it, but we had to wait till the trials were over. And over the course of about 3 months, nights and weekends, and took time off from work, anything I could, to put it all together. And it ended up not getting published and kind of sat on a shelf because the next several years was, am I going to have a job? What's happening? And then after that, just now and then picking it up. And I've actually learned a lot more about book publishing and book writing over the last few years. And I'm glad that it waited. It would have been nice to have a book back then, and maybe I'd be on my third or fourth.
Right.
But it's a much better book now because I know a lot more about structuring a book as opposed to writing a really, really long newspaper article.
Is that the most challenging part of writing for you? Is structuring, outlining the story?
I wouldn't say so. Because a lot of it is when I get any kind of story, I think it through, and when I know everything's in place, then the writing comes. And I like that part of it, though. I like the writing, but I like the planning and the outlining and all of that, and just really writing this book in book form and trying to tell it. I really wanted it to read like a novel.
Yes.
And some people have told me that they wouldn't have known it was true crime. I didn't want it to be a blow-by-blow of either the murder or the legal case. I wanted it to read like a story, that was just being told. And so, and I just loved that. I loved breaking out of that journalism mold.
Exactly.
and being more creative and really fleshing out the characters as much as I could. And so that part of it didn't bother me at all. I enjoyed it.
There's a lot of interesting characters in this story.
Yes. Yes.
For sure on that. But what attracts people? I always get asked this question because I write true crime too. What about the genre that attracts you to it to write about it? I mean,
about true crime.
Right. Instead of writing romance or writing travel books, why true crime?
Well, it's a lot of it is the journalist in me, and I had my first journalism job when I was 17, and one of the first things that I got to do was cover this huge death penalty trial, and it formed a lot of my ideas about journalism and the death penalty and all sorts of issues, criminal justice.
Right.
And then over the years, I mean, I loved being a journalist. I was ready to get out when the paper closed, but I loved being a journalist. And because people, real people, are incredibly fascinating.
Exactly.
And the reasons they do things. And when you take true crime, and I talk about this one editor who was a big influence, especially in telling this story, and figuring out most of us will never, ever be accused of anything so heinous.
Yeah.
And that's what's intriguing about this story is that you have people who you never would have thought would have been accused of this. How did they get to that point in their life where they even got accused of something like that? And I really like to try to go into people's heads and figure out what makes them tick, because to me, and creating, I'm nothing against fiction writers, because I love some good fiction that creates these realistic characters. But when you've got them already made and you just try to tell their story as best you can, that's what challenges me as a journalist and now as a writer, to capture that essence of that person and explain how they got to that point in their life.
Right. Well, I'm just fascinated by why people do crime, because most people don't get away with it. So I'm always fascinated behind it. Like this story here. I mean, these guys had everything going for them. I mean, and their lives just fell apart. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, to read that. So, but as a writer, what any tips you could provide for some of our listeners out there? A lot of them write true crime.
Well, first of all, the best book I've ever written on writing is Stephen King's On Writing.
Oh, I read
so
it.
I would,
Excellent book.
Oh, I would, and I read it over and over, and I read snippets, and then I'll read a chapter, and then I'll read it cover to cover, and I also feel like Stephen King does, is to be a writer, you've got to read.
Yeah.
And of course you've got to write, and just keep writing, and experience different kinds of writing, and I'm always writing. In my head I'm writing. Sometimes it comes out as a Facebook post. Sometimes it comes out as a blog to my friends, and I've done this since I was little. I used to write stories for my friends, and it's, if you enjoy it, I mean, I don't understand the people who think that writing is horrible and hard, and to me it's challenging many times, but I love it. I just love it.
That's a better word than hard, challenging.
Yeah,
yeah. And if you like challenges, then writing should appeal to you, right? Because
yes,
you
would think so.
Right. I'm working with a screenplay now, and I'm stuck. I'm trying to outline it, and I'm trying to figure out how to end it, and it's driving me crazy, on that. But I know eventually I will do it. But
right.
I don't want to quit because I love that.
Yeah.
It's a problem which I want to solve. Right?
Yeah, and that's exactly how I was thinking when the newspaper was closing, and so many of my colleagues wanted to continue in journalism in a daily newspaper, and I was ready to try other things. I'd done it over the years and stuff, but I really wanted to. So I looked into script writing, and I took classes, and I went to workshops, and I went to LA, and I got some really good starts on some scripts and a lot of really good nibbles.
Right.
And that's what I like. It's writing, The only thing that I won't try, because I'm really bad at it, is poetry. Cannot do poetry.
Yeah, I want to join your club because I'm the same way about it. But but listening to you, I always want to put the phone on and start writing because you're so excited about the craft, which I really appreciate on that.
Oh. I love writing, I like talking about writing, I like reading about writing, I love writing.
Right, on that then. But you're still in Tucson, right?
Yes, I am.
What? And I don't know much about Tucson, and when I think of it in my mind, I think of the desert for some reason. Tell us a little about Tucson, and also,
Tucson is great.
Right. Also, Dr. Stidham, who was the victim in this story,
yes,
loved Tucson. Tell us a little bit about why Tucson is so attractive as a destination.
Well, Tucson is great. I went to the U of A years and years ago. And I've lived in Arizona off and on since I was 16. Right. And I always wanted to come back to Tucson because it's a pretty large city. There's, I think, formerly about 500,000 people in the metropolitan area, close to 1 million. So it's a large city. But Tucson always likes to think of itself as a small town. Right, on that. And yeah, you run into people you meet the same people wherever you go, and it's gorgeous. It's a great part of the desert. We've got mountains, and we call them mountains. Back east they'd call them hills, I'm sure. But it's great. It's an artsy kind of town. So it's very welcoming for artists and the artist community, whether you're a painter or sculptor or writer or actor. There's a lot of support there for people. I really find that invigorating to be around people like that. And it's a beautiful part of the desert. It's not Death Valley. And we've got saguaros and, the typical cactus that people think of cactus that don't grow anywhere but the Sonoran Desert. And then the mountains, there's great hiking. That's one of the things that really appealed to Dr. Stidham.
Yeah, right. Yes, he liked
me
on that. You almost want to make me move on that. So I think we'll stop there and go out. Well, we're talking about David Bryan Stidham, right? And he was about, if he was alive, he'd be about, 51 years old. He was born in 1967.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about his background and how he got to Tucson. He's very well educated, right?
Yes, and he was, he's from a small town in Texas, very close-knit community, and just also interested in an early age in medicine and in healing, and he also had, according to people who talked to him or knew him, that he had a very engaging personality. So I imagine, as a physician, and people do say this who knew him in Tucson, he was a very caring person. So to go into medicine was, I think, probably a natural thing for him, and particularly he wanted to go into and help children.
Right.
So he had a really big heart, and he was very talented. So even though he came from this small town in Texas, he was very well educated. He went to Vanderbilt University, and then he went to the Texas Southwestern Medical School in Dallas,
and then ended up in Tucson. So how did he?
Yes.
He come to join the doctor's business of Brad Schwartz.
Yes, Dr. Schwartz is here in Tucson. Also, very talented eye surgeon. In fact, he specialized. He was one of the few in the country who could do particular surgeries. So but he had a Ivy League background and everything. But Dr. Schwartz was here, and he decided that he wanted someone else to take over the children's eye surgery, so he could concentrate on some more lucrative aspects. And because he was making $1 million or more a year in his own practice, so if he brought someone else in to take over the children, he could branch out and maybe have some plastic surgery techniques and things like that. So he placed an ad in a trade journal, and here's Brian Stidham in Houston looking for his next step, and he says, well, this sounds interesting, and came to Tucson to interview and just fell in love with Tucson. And he saw it as a really good place that he and his young wife could raise their children and be happy. And then he said, as he told a good friend of his, this other doctor, Dr. Schwartz, is giving me the keys to his kingdom. It's exactly what I want to do.
Right. So far, so good. But there's a backstory. That something was going on in Dr. Schwartz's life, which is very familiar today, right? With painkillers and opioids.
Yes. And, the opioid. Yes.
Right. So
yes.
Did he know that Dr. Schwartz had a drug problem before he? When did he find out about that?
It was about a year after Brian had arrived in Tucson, and he's in the office, and all of a sudden the DEA raids the office.
Wow, he had no clue.
No clue at all. And what had happened was Dr. Schwartz had been self-medicating for a shoulder injury,
right? And
he liked Vicodin. So he got his girlfriend at the time, Lourdes Lopez, a former at the time she was prosecutor, and his office manager wrote them fake prescriptions, and then he wrote them prescriptions, and they would fill the prescriptions, take some of the Vicodin for themselves, and give most of it to Brad Schwartz. Right. So it wasn't too long before the DEA caught wind of this. And so as a precursor to, charging in federal court, they raided the office, raided papers, and that really scared Brian. And he thought, who is this man that I thought, everything. I mean, their personalities had clashed a little when he came in, but nothing big.
But, this happened in December 2001, but he didn't really give his notice until October 2002. Why did it take so long?
Over the course of the case, it was Brad Schwartz being charged in federal court, and so then as the case worked its way through the court, and Brad Schwartz and Lourdes Lopez eventually entered plea agreements that would keep them out of prison. But so I'm sure the interim that followed, Brian was doing a lot of thinking about his life and his career and what was best for him.
Right.
And so then, as part of the plea deal, of course, Brad Schwartz's medical license was taken away. His privileges at hospitals and writing prescriptions, particularly, were taken away, and he was also ordered to rehab. So that must have been the final blow for Brian, to say, I can't stand this anymore. I have to think about me and my family. And while Brad was in Chicago at a facility specifically for healthcare people who have addictions, that's when Brian decided that he should go out on his own.
Right.
And that's what infuriated, by all accounts, Dr. Schwartz. He expected Brian to hold down the fort and keep the practice going, and instead he was getting wind that Brian was handing out business cards announcing his own practice.
Was he?
Yes, he was.
Right. So he was taking business away from on that.
But as Brian would say to a friend of his, he was hired to take the children patients. Brad wasn't interested in those. Although I'm sure the money that was coming in, was probably nice for Brad Schwartz.
Falling apart because his wife filed for divorce too, right? Around this time, I guess October or so?
Yeah, their marriage had been coming apart for some time, and Brad Schwartz had really never been faithful, as far as we can tell, in his marriage, and it was the affair with Lourdes Lopez that said that Brad's wife couldn't take it anymore, and they got divorced.
Right. Well, we're going to pick up the story after we take a station identification break and run some commercials, and we'll talk about how our listeners can get this great book. Scott?
Hi, I'm James Baller of Artist First Radio, and I would like to tell you about a fascinating new book from Crime Beat's Ron Chepesiuk and co-author Mike Rowe. It's titled Robin Hood of the Hood, The Life and Times of Teddy Rowe, Policy Kingpin, and it's published by Strategic Media Books. The book is a historical account of Theodore Teddy Rowe, who courageously fought the Chicago Mafia, more commonly known as the Outfit, for control of the lucrative policy racket in the Windy City. Policy, often called the numbers, is a form of illegal gambling or illegal lottery, played mostly in poor and working-class neighborhoods in the United States. In Policy, a bettor attempts to pick 3 digits to match those that will be randomly drawn the following day. For decades, Policy had been a staple in the black community, but when the white mob flexed its power in the late 1940s, many policy kings knuckled under the pressure. Not Teddy Rowe. Rowe famously told mob bosses that he'd rather die than give up control of his operation. Robin Hood of the Hood chronicles an exciting chapter of Chicago history. Go to the Kindle store at Amazon and buy it for just $2.99. For information about this book and other titles, please go to strategicmediabooks.com. That's strategicmediabooks.com.
Hey everyone, there's a new book out by author Barbara Casey, The Clock Flower. It's book 3 in the FIG mystery series. FIG stands for Females of Intellectual Genius, and there's 3, and they're all orphans. Dara Rowe, abandoned when she was 7 years old by her mother, exceptionally gifted in foreign languages, accepted to Yale University. Mackenzie Yarborough, no record of her parents or where she was born, exceptionally gifted in math and problem solving, accepted to MIT. Jennifer Torres, both parents killed in a car accident, exceptionally gifted in music and art, accepted to Juilliard. The girls are friends and graduates of Woodrose Orphanage and Academy for Young Women. After graduation, they end up separated pursuing their life's goals, when Mackenzie suddenly faces a terrifying death from the blood-dripping teeth of an ancient evil dragon in, of all places, China. The 3 females of intellectual genius will need all their special talents to keep Mackenzie alive. The Clock Flower, the latest young adult novel in the award-winning FIG mystery series by Barbara Casey, available through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and booksellers everywhere. You are listening to Crime Beat on the Artist First Radio Network. Send your questions and comments to crimebeat123@yahoo.com. Now back to your host, Mr. Ron Chepesiuk.
Thank you, Scott. We're here with A.J. Flick, and we're talking about her really interesting book, Toxic Rage, A Tale of Murder in Tucson. And the book's put out by Wild Blue Press, right?
Yes.
And it's available everywhere?
It is. You can buy it anywhere on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com, and then we have Tucson bookstores that have it. A couple scattered throughout the country, but you can ask any bookstore that you like to order it, and they can order it for you.
And you have ebook and
yes,
audio.
And
any audiobook yet?
Yes, the audiobook just came out.
Oh, wow! This would be another good book for listening on that. That sounds great. And so you got audio, ebook. How about you personally? You're on Facebook.
Yes. I have my regular Facebook page, and then I have a facebook.com/writer AJ Flick, and that's where I post everything about the book, any appearances, like your show, and everything like that. So anybody can go there and see what's happening with it. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, I forgot to post the show on your thing. I was so busy this week. I was going to friend you and book it, but you can do that yourself. I'll send you the publicity for this. Well, you can just take it off the website if you want.
Okay.
Because the show will be available 24 hours after.
Wonderful.
On that sort of thing. How about YouTube? Are you any?
Oh yes, I have a YouTube channel too.
Oh, wow. What's your YouTube channel about?
I post anything that all of the media that I've been doing with this radio. Also, I've done a few TV shows, and I'm going to be building up the YouTube channel when I have time. And add, because I've been on several true crime shows about this case and other cases, so I'll be posting that on my AJ Flick YouTube channel.
That sounds great on that sort of thing. So anyways, Dr. Schwartz had his license taken away, but he got it reinstated, right?
Yes, I mean, he did everything that was required of him. When it first happened and Brian left, well, he fired Brian, had his parents close down the office until he could come back. And after he went to rehab and he complied with all of the court orders, he had to do counseling, and they give it back to you in stages. And so he went through, the first stage where he could write, some prescriptions, and then harsher prescriptions, and then started getting back his hospital privileges, and which is one of the curious things about this. When it wasn't Brian Stidham wasn't killed right after he left the practice and Dr. Schwartz came back. It was a couple years later, and Dr. Schwartz was 2 months away from getting his full medical license back.
Right.
And which his defense attorney would always point to saying, why would he ruin it right then?
Right, exactly. So I think on that then, but he didn't. that was the problem. What happened?
Yes.
Did he relapse?
No, he didn't relapse. Really, by the time the DEA really came down on him, he had gotten some surgery for his medical condition, and so once he didn't have the pain, he wasn't taking the Vicodin. So, but he complied. He had to go to rehab. He had to go to counseling and everything like that. So he really was not. He didn't relapse at all. But as prosecutors would say, stemming from this incident where he's in rehab, and Brian, as Schwartz saw it, betrayed him,
right,
by wanting to go off on his own. That's what the prosecutors say built this toxic rage over the next couple of years that just built and built and built. And he started, they had so many people come in to say, hey, this guy, this doctor just showed up dead. This other doctor asked me to find a hitman for him. Or this other doctor asked me if I would kill him. And so apparently over these next 2 years, Dr. Schwartz talked to a lot of people, and he was really kind of wrapped up in the mafioso world. He liked The Godfather and The Sopranos. And so a lot of these conversations that he had with people kind of took on that tinge. And so I guess it just fed this rage that was building in him that just
these people
wouldn't...
believed that he was serious?
That nobody did. And that's nobody did.
So they didn't report it, right?
Yeah, nobody reported. Even Lourdes Lopez, his their relationship was off and on, and they became engaged at one point in early 2004, so even she, as a former prosecutor and as a practicing attorney, didn't take him seriously and didn't tell any of her friends until Brian Stidham showed up dead, and she remembered how Brad would talk about wanting him dead, wanting him killed, wanting him harmed. And so that was the curious thing about it, but, you know, who knows how certainly by their testimony, a lot of these people said, I thought it was bizarre, I thought he was just mouthing off. And even Brian had heard rumors that Dr. Schwartz wanted him hurt and even killed. And one of their mutual friends said, you know, I'm sure I've said I wanted my partner shot. I'm not going to do it, though. I don't think he'd do it. So nobody thought that, you know, nobody knew that he was, you know, certainly talking to a lot of different people.
So eventually he ends up meeting this guy, Bruce, right?
Yes,
Bigger.
Ronald Bruce Bigger, yes.
Right, and I mean, how did they two hook up? Because they seemed...
Two different worlds.
Running in different circles.
Yeah. Well, Bruce Bigger is out of Indiana, and at the time, at that point in his life, he was very much into. He had fallen into addiction, and when he was in Tucson, when he came to Tucson, hanging out with that, you know, kind of addiction and also criminal element. Bruce Bigger doesn't have a huge criminal history, a lot of low-level stuff, and a lot of times it involved getting beaten up or beating someone up.
Right.
And he was beaten up and referred to Dr. Schwartz because he had an eye injury.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how they met.
Right. Well, he was supposedly a fugitive from Indiana, right?
Yeah, but not, like I said, not like he was, you know, wanted for murder or kidnapping or anything like that. He had a lot of petty crimes and also not following through.
It was only $10,000, right?
That they say was exchanged.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not a lot of money. I mean, you know, if you're going to kill somebody, I mean, for $10,000. So why did he? How did this transaction work out? I mean, how did he decide that he was going to take the job? Bigger was going to take the job.
Well, we don't know that. Neither Schwartz nor Bigger have said anything close to this is how it went down. There was no confession. But prosecutors, as they were piecing things together and tracing, you know, so many people coming forward and saying it was Schwartz, we don't know how, it was Schwartz. And they traced his movements where on the night of the murder he was with Bruce Bigger. And then the next day, and they had some bank footage of Schwartz going to a bank and withdrawing $10,000, making a phone call. And then the next thing we hear from other defendants is that Bruce Bigger has a wad of cash and is treating his friends to a Las Vegas vacation.
Wow.
So we don't, you know, that's all we know. And Schwartz has said, hey, you know, as I was making $1 million, so it wasn't unusual for me to withdraw a lot of money.
Well, we're going to stop it there and take another break. Time flies and we're having fun here.
Yes.
And we'll talk about where Schwartz was on the night of the murder. I mean, he was nowhere near that. How they connect is really interesting. Scott, let's take a break and run a couple of commercials. We'll be back shortly.
Hello, everyone. Book 3 of the Moccasin Hollow Mysteries by author Hawk McKinney is out now. Curse of the Ancients. As Craig Ingram climbed the stairs of the derelict building, that peculiar stench of a dead body hit him. It was the same smell, no matter where, a special ops SEAL encounter gone sour, or in a vacant roach-infested apartment. Inside, his SEAL buddy, Grayson McGerald, head of Buckingham Parish's Homicide Investigative Support Division, was huddled with the coroner, next to a swollen, decaying corpse that was days old and hardly more than oozing dead meat. The private investigator inside Craig had a gut feeling that there was more to this than a dead body, and Craig's granny always told him, trust your feelings. But that was before the Russian set down 2 of his Black Falcon choppers on Craig's Moccasin Hollow private airstrip in an uninvited stopover. It got worse. From Moccasin Hollow to Israel and on to Turkey, a nightmare of one-of-a-kind ancient artifacts threatened the serene life Craig knew and loved. Will it also destroy the world? The Curse of Ancients by Hawk McKinney, available everywhere great books are sold. Thanks for joining us on Crime Beat on the Artist First Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at artistfirst.com. Now back to your host, Mr. Ron Chepesiuk.
Thank you, Scott. We're here with A.J. Flick, and we're discussing her really interesting book, Toxic Rage, A Tale of Murder in Tucson. And the book is everywhere. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore. There's an ebook. There's an audio book. AJ is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. She's a social media butterfly, right?
I had to learn how to do a lot of that.
Right. Well, I'm going to see how much of a butterfly you are. Do you have a website?
I do not. I'm in the process of setting that up, yes.
Right. I think you should have one. You're going to be famous someday. So that's good. And then and she's even got a YouTube channel. Wow.
Yes.
And what's on your YouTube channel?
I have all as much of the media as I can get that I'm doing. Some TV appearances, radio appearances, things like that. And then over the years, I've been on some of the true crime shows. I pop up now and then. I always know because my friends, tweet and Facebook me, I see you on TV. And some of them are actually shows about this case. There's supposed to be one coming up called Missing Time.
Yeah, that's good.
I
have a YouTube channel. I just remembered, but I never used it. Somebody set one up for me about 5 years ago. I got to look at it sometime. Maybe I do something with it.
I don't even know if I knew about YouTube 5 years ago.
I don't know. But anyways, we'll get back to our thing here. Back to this discussion we had going here, and Dr. Schwartz. He actually had an alibi on that night, right? He was with a woman named Lisa Goldberg, girlfriend, and that was probably his worst mistake.
Well, especially when you hear Dr. Schwartz tell the case that not too complimentary.
What happened? She heard him and Bruce, right?
Yes. Yes. What happened was Dr. Schwartz was on this date with Lisa Goldberg at a restaurant a few miles away from the murder scene, and then he was interrupted in their dinner date with a phone call. Asked her if she wouldn't mind that a fellow that he knows joined them. And so that led, to a taxi cab ride across town for Bruce Bigger arriving at the restaurant, and Lisa describing this strange person who showed up on their date, and not quite knowing where he came from or how he knew Brad, but definitely, saying some things that, especially in the early stages of the investigation, piqued the law enforcement's interest in who possibly could be the hitman.
Right. But you're saying he wasn't known to be a violent person. But boy, was the crime violent, right?
It was.
To him. It was just amazing. He's driving a Lexus, found in his Lexus, right? 15.
No, the Lexus was missing.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Stidham was found about 10 o'clock, 10:30.
Yeah.
They didn't know at the crime scene how he was killed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes stab wounds don't look like, you would think so on TV. So they didn't know if he was stabbed or shot, but he ended up being about 15 times stabbed, no defensive wounds.
Wow.
And his car was missing, and they know there should have been a car there. He was in the parking lot of his medical complex, and there were registration papers for his Lexus. So they knew that there should have been a car associated with this person. And when they finally found the car, they could tell by the blood spatter that the driver's door had been open when Brian was first attacked.
Wow, on that. And so how did they get on to Dr. Schwartz?
The night of the murder, when the law enforcement finally went over to Brian's house, because they knew his address and everything, and they said, well, are there more victims? What's going on? So they went to the house and they woke up Daphne Stidham, Brian's wife, and immediately she was very suspicious to the deputies who showed up, because she kept saying, "How was my husband killed?" And they said, "We haven't told you your husband was dead." And they noticed that she didn't look to his side of the bed. She had what appeared to be his will by her bedside table. And so they were very curious in talking to her, and in the course of talking to her, and eventually telling her that her husband was dead, she said the only person who could have harmed him, who would want him harmed, is Brad Schwartz.
Right, on that then. So the police went about gathering evidence, right?
Yes, and in the meantime, they had a lot of people coming in, because this was a highly publicized case, of course, saying, "Hey, I know that doctor," or "I know a doctor who's talked about that doctor." So they had a lot of people calling in as they were looking more and more into Brad Schwartz.
Right, on that sort of thing. And they found was a fingerprint on Bruce's fingerprint on the radio.
No, it was eventually they found a very small amount of DNA on a knob on the console,
right,
which in the first trial turned out to be, it was said to be a big thing that really pinpointed who the killer was. Eventually, a further testimony, it was not an issue when the further testimony said almost anybody could have left that DNA. So it was not a DNA case at all, or fingerprint, or anything that directly led to Bruce Bigger, other than the circumstantial information that they found, that when they traced Brad Schwartz's movements, added,
right?
Yeah, phone calls, and also, eyewitness testimony that they were together that night. So it was that kind of circumstantial information that led to the arrest of Brad Schwartz and Bruce Bigger.
Well, this Lisa Goldberg that was with them in that restaurant, how big of a role did she play in the case?
She played a substantial role, because she did say some very provocative things that later, as I explained in the book, Brad Schwartz, who never testified, he kind of shot down and had very good explanations for. The main accuser, though, the person who really tied everything together, was Lourdes Lopez.
Right.
And that she had been so close. I'm sorry?
Former prosecutor.
She had been eventually was disbarred,
right,
but at the time she was working as a defense attorney. And at the time of Brian Stidham's murder, Brad Schwartz's ex-fiancée. As I said, they had a very tumultuous affair over the years, and were briefly engaged before, again, their differences tore them apart. But and one of the interesting things, I thought I'd seen everything with this case, but when I was putting the book together for Wild Blue Press, I had to do an update. And so I had to see where the appeals are. And there is a very interesting twist involving Lourdes Lopez that I'm not going to say here, because you have to get the book, of course.
Okay, yeah.
But
we'll leave it
to
salivate with the that sort of thing. But that was the thing that I thought was interesting, that when they went to arrest Dr. Schwartz, when he arrived at his apartment, they found him naked with a woman.
Yes, they did. Yes.
This guy got around, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh, there are a lot of women that he was involved with at different times. Which you can see how his marriage broke up. But
right. It's a dumb question, but was it the money or his looks?
I don't know, and people, even people who knew him through Lourdes and friends that I'm still friends with, but I don't know what it was, because he's not like Robert Redford, dashing good looks, smooth. But he had something about him that women just really.
$1 million a year. salary.
Yeah, and someone also pointed, that didn't a lot. Some of the women were in it for the money, right. But he also, I'm sure, had a knack of appealing to women who were vulnerable. Right. Who he knew. I know some very beautiful women who came into contact with him, and I'm like, did he ever come on to you? And no, not at all. But of course these women I know weren't the vulnerable kind of type, or, exactly. He had a lot of, bunch of women who were just flattered that a doctor would be interested in them.
Exactly. On that. But so the case is on appeal, right?
Yes, both of the cases are being appealed.
Well, the trial took place in 2007, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, God, it's been almost 12 years.
Yeah, I know.
Well, why so long the appeal?
Well, I'm not with Bigger's case. It's really interesting because his appeal is like a lot later in the earlier stages than Schwartz's. There's been a lot of issues in his case about wanting to represent himself, and the court saying you really shouldn't, and so it's not like it's highly unusual in Arizona that this is still being appealed. But yeah, as I said, there still hasn't been anything that shut down each appeal to say no. Right. You had a fair trial, and Schwartz has a lot more complicated issues than Bigger does.
We're going to have to stop it there. And just briefly, we have about 20 seconds. What's next for you?
I am just promoting this book as much as I can, but I do have another book in mind, and hoping that we can get something inked.
Right. Keep us
at some point.
If it's true crime, and I'd love to have you back on. You're a great guest.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Thank you, AJ. AJ Flick, the book's Toxic Rage, which is really a fascinating book, and we highly recommend it. And have a great evening, AJ.
Thank you. You too, Ron.
Okay, you're welcome. Well, we hope you enjoyed Crime Beat this evening. Remember the show next December 6, 2018. We have 3 authors on talking about the murder in the VA. Behind the Murder Curtain, Special Agent Bruce Hackman hunts doctors and nurses who kill our veterans. And the co-authors are Bruce Hackman, Michael Bessiani, and Jerry Smederer. We hope you enjoyed Crime Beat this evening on Artist First World Radio Network. Wherever you are tonight, I'd like to thank you out there for listening to our broadcast this evening. In the meantime, we welcome your emails and thoughts about our program. You can email us at crimebeat123@yahoo.com. And please spread the word about our show. And until next week, we hope you tune into Crime Beat next Thursday, same time at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where you'll want to have a front row seat to the fascinating world of crime. Sleep tight, everybody.